And welcome, everybody, to Morning Magazine for this April 22nd, 2020. I have your host, James J. Malouf here. In part two, we're going to talk with our friends at ODC, Pam Ross and Julie Strennan. Right now, though, we have newly elected, brand new, brand new, like coming right out the box, newly elected Wood County Chairman Lance Pliml with us, along with our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Big thank you to them for being here. Lance, good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be here. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you in, and it's great to have you back. Right away, I want to see how you and yours are doing, how you and your family, everybody doing all right?
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty similar to everybody in this county or this part of the state. You know, new rules, a kind of a new way of life. But I think generally speaking, the community's done a great job. We don't have any active current infections that we're aware of. Life goes on, but it's a little bit different way of doing things.
Good to hear, though. Everybody's up and running and doing well, and especially that you are really, man, because you've got a lot of work on your plate.
Well, yeah.
A lot coming up, at least. And it's certainly things that we just, don't know. Around the corner, this is one of those uncharted territory kind of things. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, for those that don't know you, Lance, and I can't imagine there's many out there that don't, but for those that don't, can we get a little backstory on you, a little background?
Yeah, sure. I guess I had a little 2-year hiatus here, but I have served on our county board. I guess I've been elected about 12 terms. Served as a county board chairman for 6 terms. 2-year hiatus where Doug Mahan served as our county board chairman, and then I was reelected again yesterday. The days are running. Forgetting what day of the week it is because schedules have changed, but reelected again yesterday to a leadership position, and greatly appreciate that opportunity. So I serve locally, but I've also served as the president or chairman of the board of the Wisconsin Counties Association somewhere between the last 5 to 7 years, basically. So I'll always try to differentiate between our county's opinion, the opinion of the Counties Association at state level, and then if it's my own, bent on things, I'll try to separate that from what the county's official position might be. So,
is that a tough dance to balance?
Not really. With our county board, I'm not saying that we don't have disagreement on issues, but the job of the chairman is, I was just thinking about this on the way over here. You serve to some extent like the conductor of an orchestra. You got a lot of people that play a lot of important parts, that bring a lot to the table. And in some respects, all you're doing is, pointing to different people at different times, trying to bring out the talents in them and letting them strive. Because, although it's, I'm honored to be selected to be their chair, it's a team game, and if you have a 10-9 split, for instance, on every issue, that's a struggle. You hope that you can cooperate, collaborate, compromise, and at the end of the day, you come up with solutions that benefit the community.
Well said. And I think that there's a point in there that is really unique to me and interesting to hear from somebody in your position, where looking at the talents that different people have, it makes a lot of sense. And we hear this in other forms and other businesses, but not as often in our government. And that is a really unique thing to be able to bring, I think, to notice in people and be able to bring out of people and help those certain moments shine. And certainly one of those reasons why you were brought back in, probably those kind of visions, those kind of thoughts. Talking about the process of you coming in and the voting in general in the state, it's a broad topic, so we don't have to touch too much on that or anything. But with a lot of, I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people about the confusion, about a lot of the things with it. So it is something that I do want to address with you. Was it a process this year that you feel confident about how the voting was done in this state? And did you locally, let's even center it more on the local end, were you good with that? Or how did you feel about it?
Sure. That's a really interesting question. And, I did watch the interview the other day that you had with our outgoing mayor, Zach Gruink. And Zach, I certainly want to thank you for your service to the community over those years. And I heard how everybody weighed in on that. Obviously, there was a change. Do I think there would have been a change in the outcome of any of the elections statewide? I kind of doubt that. I think it probably would have played about the way it did. You had in those partisan elections, we're not partisan in these local races, but I think there was an equal amount of concern on both sides. The confusion really came, and I'm not trying to point fingers here, but that last minute order by the governor when he's saying we're not going to hold an election, that the week before he said, or 3 days before, we're going to hold the election. So all of a sudden there is a little bit of confusion out there. That being said, I think we learned a lot here. And obviously that is, if you were informed, or if you take the time to be informed, early voting existed. Nothing changed there. absentee voting existed, and nothing changed there. There were some hiccups possibly in ballots getting returned and how that happens. We're looking at a new statewide system to address that. All in all, I have confidence in democracy. I think it worked. I think there was a small hiccup. I don't think it would have changed things to any great extent. Probably better that those get resolved during I hate to say it because it does affect local races, better resolved in a spring election maybe.
I think that's a really good point.
Than a fall election.
Absolutely.
So, it's trial and error. And we're doing the same thing at the county board. In counties across the state, most of them required in-person attendance, sitting in your chair on a board floor to be able to cast a vote.
Yeah.
And we've had to adapt and adopt some new methods. We've passed resolutions in our own county to do that, and generally speaking, across the state, counties have done that to allow for electronic participation in these particular times. And so not only do individuals get a voice, people can watch from home, they can phone in or email in, chat in questions, but supervisors who are concerned about that have the ability to stay home.
Yeah, and I appreciate the answer. I appreciate you taking on the answer or the question. But when it came to the confusion part of it, and it's something that everybody I've talked to, even on those that knew what to do, were still a little confused and everything. And I think that's understandable. It's something that I was talking with Patrick Teston about with this the other day, where it's frustrating. But do you feel that it's also one of those things where we all we all understand why it's frustrating? Certain things, they frustrate us, but we get it. We understand. We're in a situation right now where there is no playbook for and that kind of thing. So do you feel that it is that kind of? It's understandable why it was. Yeah, it's frustrating, but it's an understandable frustration. Or there could have been more done.
Both.
That would have been my answer. That would have been my answer. It probably would have been a lot of our answers.
I think a more cohesive, message, from a higher level would have probably been helpful. But we learned a tremendous amount during this, and we have to adapt. And I think if we look back in history, I always laugh. I look at a historical perspective when people say, these are the toughest times we've ever gone through.
Yeah.
And I sit back pretty cynically and I kind of chuckle to myself, and I think, that's because we have a very narrow perspective. Those people who lived through World War I or World War II and went and served,
right.
and I have the ultimate respect for our veterans. But I want you to go back to a time of World War I and II when those people had no contact or communication with their family, sometimes for years. Now the commitment maybe isn't any less, but you can Skype people in, you can call them on your cell phone.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
You might not be able to do that from a submarine, but I mean, there's instances. But we learn every time we're challenged. Mm-hmm. We're certainly facing some challenging times right now, but this is going to move us forward. I know that everybody at every level is working on this. From the federal government, state government, local governments, how we're going to make sure that we don't have the same issues again. The other thing you tend to hear is press coming from those large population areas, which had many more problems than we had. Locally, there, for the most part, other than the mixed messages, there really wasn't a difficulty in voting. There was a difficulty if you maybe had a compromised immune system, you didn't want to go out. And I would agree that the safer at home truly is safer at home, but it's not a one size fits all. I mean, while we're doing that, at the same time, we're destroying the economy. So where do we get balance? And that's what we're all looking for and striving for.
One of the toughest decisions that we all are facing right now is balancing human life with money. That's the bottom line. It's not an easy decision to make, and it's not something that there is a clear-cut answer for. It is the definition of a gray area. So that is one of those reasons why having people like yourself in these positions we appreciate, because you're taking a perspective that we all need to have right now, I think, with that, where we've got to find that balance. And it's also one of those things, too, where you bring up a good point about perspective, I think. And something that we could all, even those of us that have perspective, could always use to take a moment and have some more. And we're pretty fortunate with the electronics and the way technology is nowadays and being able to interact with people and stuff. It could be a lot different. And we're made from hard times. Like especially just looking at us here in America, that's what makes us. Our country is built on hard times, is built on toughness. It's not something where if every day was golden in this country, what kind of people would we be? We're made from these kind of tough times. So I think that you're right. I see a good point in this, a good silver lining in this, where we're going to come out of this stronger and more together as a country.
Yeah, I like to look at it. I don't know that it's always an either or proposition.
Right.
There's usually some, middle ground that you can work on. I find a hard time, and this is no knock on any business. Any business right now, most of those businesses are struggling, and they're struggling greatly. But I always find it amazing, for instance, that, and you've heard it everywhere if you're listening on the radio, but, I have big box stores that are open and I walk in every one of them because I grocery shop too, and there's hundreds of people in the store. And yet I've got the mom and pop shoe store. If they wanted to mask everybody and let one person at a time in, they can't. I think there's room for compromise. There's room for for movement, and there's a way to do that. The rules that apply in Milwaukee or some in the hot spots, we probably shut down the northern part of the state 3 or 4 weeks ahead of when we would have ever needed to. When you look at the federal and state guidelines they're rolling out saying, when we have a decrease in the number of infections over 2 weeks, and I kind of tongue-in-cheek said to some of the administration the other day, it's kind of hard to decrease from zero. Where do you want me to go? So, how do we come up with a common sense approach to, minimizing infection rates? You heard the term flatten the curve all the time. That was done to make sure we had hospital capacity. Yet at the same time, if I look, we're laying off people right now in our medical facilities because there's nobody there. So is there a middle ground? Is there a way to handle some of that? I don't have the answer, or I would say it. And I'm going to just briefly, I said this on the county board floor. I don't know where this quote originated from. I know it's been attributed to Helen Keller way back, but it really resonated with me recently. And it's one that just said, the bend in the road isn't the end of the road unless you fail to make the curve. And that's what we're dealing with every day right now. Yeah. If somebody said to me, I think some of the statements made by politicians, especially at the federal level, sometimes at the state level, don't make a lot of sense because I can't answer the question. They say, when's this going to end? If you ask me that, I don't know. Yeah. When is the virus going to reemerge, raise its up? I don't know. So we deal with it every day. And the part I guess I want to really emphasize to those people out there in the counties is, or in the communities, the counties provide services, emergency services. So although we have people that shelter at home, stay at home, they're working from home, we run dispatch. Can't dispatch from home. We run a sheriff's department. Can't do that from home. We have a jail. We can't send everybody home. We have child protective services. Those people have to get out. We own a nursing home. We have the Norwood Northwood County Annex right now where we have people up there. So as much as you'd like to send everybody home, I guess I'll personally thank all those people in our county, those employees who have, worked through this. They go home to families. That's at risk. And then I want to thank the community for, using the safest practices you can, and alluding back to the fact that you said is while we do that, we still can't kill the entire economy in the area.
Well, yeah, and it's a little. You might experience some of this too. It's a little amusing to me how many scientists we have had all of a sudden come out of the woodworks. Like people who have no degree, don't know anything about science, barely past 6th grade chemistry or whatever, and now they're scientists. Now all of a sudden they know stuff. We have to trust our officials on this one, both government wise and scientifically, and finding that balance and being able to do this because we want to open the economy. It's not going to do us any good if we get no people to go to these places.
Yeah, and that's I look a little bit at choices. You get pressure. I get calls every day. Is it any less safe for your local? I'll use examples for your local hair salon. If the person who's providing the service is masked and the person coming in is masked and they don't have a waiting room full of people, is that a viable option? Yeah, maybe. I'm not an immunologist. I can tell you for a fact though that the more you shelter, the safer you are. The less you shelter, the less safe you are. But where's the balance?
Right.
Somebody I don't even know where I was listening or who I was listening to on the way in here, but somebody said to me the other day, the rules that are in place in New York have been adopted by places like Montana. Well, if Montana would have had the outbreak, would New York have shut down? The answer is probably not.
Right. It's a very good point.
It's flyover country. So we have to adapt. We have to try to stay ahead of the curve. And I will say this, we have our public health officer, the director of our health department is Sue Comferman, and Sue is one of the best in the state. And
Here.
We're getting fantastic guidance. We're working, through her guidance. We're working with law enforcement. We're working with legislators. We're working with the administration and trying to provide the do the best we can in uncertain times.
Sue's great. Everybody over there we appreciate. Sue's ahead of that. She's really something. We're speaking again with newly elected Will County Chairman Lance Pliml, and I appreciate such the transparent and open conversation with you, Lance, that we've had in the past before on other subjects. I want to ask a little bit about why you wanted to get back into the game. Why you wanted to get back into this.
Well, I don't know that it ever really left. I started in this a long time ago. I said I served, I don't know, I think it's 12. It could have been 14 years in this position. When a new chairman was elected, my first goal was to be productive, to never be somebody who was obstructionist, to work forward. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we need every one of those supervisors to work toward a goal. And, when the opportunity came to step back in this position, it's appreciated. And I guess when you look at 72 other counties have, picked you to lead, maybe our county derives some benefit, from that perspective. And I think part of it is, the reason maybe you're back is you're a team player. Don't criticize in public. Try to orchestrate the best outcome you can. Recognize, you touched on it, the leadership that people provide in certain areas. And we have some supervisors. If I start naming them, I'm going to get in trouble. But whether I agree or disagree with the supervisor on every issue, there are supervisors we have that have chaired committees or sit on those that have provided leadership and guidance for years. And they're willing to get out in the community and do those things. And so whether I have ever agreed or disagreed with somebody on an issue, it's always a conversation. It never devolves into an argument, and we listen and we try to, garner the best information we can and move forward. And I think to some extent that gets appreciated. So if you said to me, what's my leadership style? It is that cooperative, collaborative compromise. Let's listen to everybody. And at the end of the day, let's take all that, throw out the garbage, try to use the good, and hope at the end of the day we have a cohesive message.
This isn't an opinion show, and I do my best to not take sides in any situation or anything, especially politically with Democrats, Republicans, all that kind of thing. But I have never, faltered on this. We need more of that. We need more emotions and feelings like that as far as being able to listen. You've mentioned the word you want to listen to people a couple of times. We have way too much of people just barking at each other and yelling insults at each other and not hearing each other. You can disagree and still have a conversation. We need more of that. We need to get back to that. That's the politics that I grew up with. That's the kind of thing that I always had. And I think we need more of that. It's great to hear, having another person doing that.
Well, it all starts with civility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the part that, I'll use the state level that I have always brought to the table, where you say, let's have that conversation. Let's not yell and scream. I've sat through, I think I've been in office through 4 different mayors here in the Wisconsin Rapids area, several different governors. I get upset too, and I've sat in that governor's conference room with, both parties, and I get in trouble sometimes because I say the other side is not always wrong because they have a D or R after their name, or vice versa.
Right.
There are some good ideas that emanate from both sides, and you need to listen to that. And at the end of the day, just like at home, I try to take every decision to the lowest common denominator. I don't win every argument at home. I'm not going to win every argument at home.
Yeah.
But I try to make every decision kind of based on, well, would I do that for myself? Mm-hmm. If it benefits me in that process, and probably benefits the majority of people out there. And then everybody comes from a different circumstance. Right now I know that those that are exceptionally, well off in our community aren't suffering to the extent that some of those people that have, that live paycheck to paycheck. Somehow we have to make sure we take care of those people, or they are either not going to live here when it's done, or they're going to be homeless, or there's going to be other issues that we deal with on another level. So it's the balance. And where I don't sleep at night, there are times where you say, I have a finite number of dollars. It's tax dollars. Do I allocate that? And this is an extreme example, but do I allocate that to the child, who was born with physical or mental challenges, or do I give it to the veteran that just came back, missing a limb? There isn't a right answer.
Right.
It's not a right or wrong. It's not a left or right. It's how do I do the most I can with the resources I have?
Right. And that's all we can ask for, I think, from our officials. When it comes to being an official right now, or going into a position, whether you've held it before or you're newly elected or any of these kind of things, I got to imagine that with the situation we're in right now, it's a pretty hectic situation. What do you, as far as kind of going back to why you got back into this, what are you excited about? What are you to be doing this again, to be back in this position?
Well, I'm always excited, and I've always said that I think everybody in our community should serve at some level, someplace, sometime.
Hmm.
Those are people that tend not to yell later when they get in an issue. But I don't know that I'm. You almost hate to say this on the air. These are scary times.
Yeah.
I don't know what's out there. I know our sales tax revenue projections are way down. I know that our costs in some areas are way up. I know that there's not going to be a well to go to fill that hole. If I find any solace in this, it's that the fact that there's 72 other counties in this state that are facing exactly the same thing. Nobody's coming out of this unscathed. Mm-hmm. So when we're looking to Washington, we're having those conversations through the Counties Association. You can backfill individuals, you can backfill some of the need to businesses, but governments through this time have had to be up and running. And we've got a giant hole to fill. And I'm hoping that we are not the forgotten child in that process, because I can tell you, tax revenue not derived over the last 3 months is tax revenue lost. It doesn't come back. I can get busier next month and the following month, but I'm never going to fill that hole. No. So, what you say, what am I excited about? I'm always excited with the challenge. Mm-hmm. But frankly, I'm concerned. I'm deeply concerned. And so any input that I get from the community, I have people call me all the time and say, have you thought about? And I always say, my favorite question is the one that I don't have the answer to. Or maybe that's not even the favorite one. That's the good one is the question I don't have an answer to. My favorite one is the question I never even thought about asking myself. And, sometimes the unintended consequence or the question that's asked when nobody else asks it is the direction you end up going. Mm-hmm. And so I love that input from the community. And I think one of the things I bring to that is I've heard a lot of those, and I hear them from around the state, the different regions, and the different solutions.
I think that we as human beings, and especially us in the Midwest here, when I say that we're made from hard times, I refer to like the creation of a diamond, kind of. That we just become tougher and more resilient from these kind of things. And it maybe excited isn't the right word, but it's the lack of a better word to really use for it. And okay, we are in this situation, we can't change it. So what can we do while we're in it? And what can we do to benefit from it? What silver linings, what things can we do to try to learn from this and that? And I think you touch on a lot of that.
Yeah, we're learning, like you said, on the technological end, we're learning. Mm-hmm. We're learning that we have to be more adaptive. We've learned right now that both at a local level, state and federal level, that we need to be more prepared for these emergencies. We know that we need to bring manufacturing back to this country. We know that drug manufacturers have to be here. So we learn that at the federal level. We learn it at the local level. We will come out of this at the end of the day, and I can't tell you which day that will be. We'll come out of this better prepared. We'll come out of this stronger. Again, you hear it everywhere. We're not going to flip a switch and be back to perfectly normal, but it's going to happen. When I hear people say, we have no idea where we're going to be in a year and a half, well, I have a pretty good idea where we're going to be in a couple of months, and that's probably in pretty good shape. I do get frustrated when I hear people say, we're looking at what we're going to do with university schedules in September. Mm-hmm. I'm dealing with month to month.
Yeah.
And I fully believe that we'll be on top of this long before that.
We really appreciate the time from you, Lance. Looking forward to hanging out and talking again real soon.
Always appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Again, a big thank you to newly elected Wood County Board Chairman Lance Pliml for being here with us, and our friends Kevin and everybody over at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. We appreciate you guys. Thanks again for being in with us. We have Pam Ross and Julie Stennon coming in from ODC in part 2 of Morning Magazine, AM 1320 WFHR.